Welcome to Spaghetti Basics of Basic Animation in Blender. Now I know the title is rather strange, but really all this tutorial is going to do is going to show you some of the simple and basic keyframing that you can do with objects. It goes without saying that animation itself is a complex and heavy subject, and once you are comfortable with messing around you can check out the following tutorials, and we will introduce you to some more of the complex tools that Blender has to offer. The way that you animate in Blender, and also other 3D packages, is to use keyframes. This term is derived from 2D animation, where you'd have keyframes that were set out as key poses within them if you're animating characters, and the in-between frames, or tween frames, tweening is known in Flash, they'd be drawn by another animator. I'm not sure the way it worked, but you'd have one person doing the keyframes, another maybe an understudy doing the frames in between. When creating keyframes in Blender, it does all the tweening for you, so that's pretty useful. Just like in Flash, but without with an extra dimension, 3D obviously. I'm going to show you a simple example, which is fairly common as a first exercise, and you can have a go at yourself and to get comfortable with the whole concept of keyframing. We're just going to animate a bouncing ball. So let's get rid of this square and create a plane for the floor. So X to delete, space, add mesh, plane, and you can see we've got a plane there. We'll scale it out a bit, see how that looks in the camera by pressing 0 on the numpad. Go back to top view, and we can create a sphere, which is going to be over here, UV sphere. It's not important really how many. We're not doing any editing to it. Might as well set smooth to make it a bit nicer. There we go. We'll scale that down a bit. And when you're in orthographic mode, it's very useful, so you can line up objects. Obviously the plane's going to be along this axis here, and now using orthographic you can see it's pretty much touching the bottom. Just using the basic commands here, G for grab, pressing X, Y, Z to constrain along an axis, middle mouse button to rotate around in the viewport, which are covered in earlier tutorials. So let's now think about the movement. We're going to want to take the ball from one side to the other over a period of maybe 1.5 or 2 seconds. I think 2 seconds will do. So first of all, we'll move our ball by G and to whichever corner you want. And before we move anything after this, we'll set our first keyframe. So to set a keyframe, press I, and you'll get the insert key menu up. And the reason why we're doing it now is because if we went, say if I did it now and I moved it there, inserted a keyframe, when I went to play it, it wouldn't move from here because it wouldn't take into account the fact that because there isn't a keyframe that's recording the location here first. So always remember to set a keyframe before you want to move or animate, otherwise the original position won't be taken into account when you play the animation back. So back to pressing I for insert keyframe. We have all kinds of different options to key, but in this tutorial we'll stick with location, rotation and scale, which are here, here and here. Well, this is size in the insert menu. And to cover them all, which is fairly useful for a ball, we're going to be doing well, you might do some scaling later on to add a bit of bounce, a bit more dynamic, so let's just click that one. And that's our first key in there on the first frame there. So we'll just, after you've made the first keyframe and you've moved your ball to a corner, and since we want all the attributes to remain the same, we'll key another location. Move it here. In fact, first of all we'll move to, it's 25 frames a second, so 50. You can change frames by pressing the arrow keys up and down. That'll go between 10 plus or minus frames. The arrow keys left and right will go up and down 1 frame, and over here where it displays the frames there, it'll also display the frames in the buttons panel, where you can go to any specific frame you want to, which is very useful if you've got a rather long animation. Okay, so we're on frame 50. I'm going to grab and move our ball over here, and then I'm going to insert location by pressing 1. It's a good shortcut, or you can click it, and when you press down you'll see that it'll move across. fairly simple. If you press Alt A in the 3D viewport, you'll see your animation play out. If you go here, since our animation's only 50 frames long, if you go to the scene option by pressing F10, and you've got your sequence here, so just press, I'll type in a 50 in the end, enter, and panel here, and there's the animation, and it'll actually repeat itself now when you play it, because it'll only play from 1 to 50. It's fairly useful. Also, when you render out animation, it'll only render out 1 to 50. Okay. Now you can see that it's moving across fairly well, and what we really need to do now is add a bit more dynamic to it. So, before we key any more transformation, I'm just going to open up another window and introduce you to an indispensable part of the animation. It's part of any 3D package, in fact. It's our IPO curve sheet. Now, if we go here, right click, split the area, and then we choose IPO curve editor, you see we've got some curves here, and they represent the transformations that we've done. See, these are the X and the Y axis, because that's what it's going along at, and you can see that the lock is yellow, lock Z, sorry, is yellow, and that hasn't moved at all because it's just going along in essentially a straight line. And now what we're going to do is I'll just show you how to affect the keyframe. We're going to add onto the Z axis from the first one. So instead of going to add all, we just want to add the location, and you can see the Z axis goes from high to low. It's a fairly simple concept, but we only want it to go about 10 frames before hitting the ground. So I'm going to show you how to alter an IPO curve. Instead of grabbing it and moving it to the right position, you right click on your curve, tab to edit, and right click on this keyframe and move it along into the timeline where your current bar is. The green bar represents the current frame you're on. I won't go into too much depth with the IPO curve sheet, because it's actually a fairly complex piece of kit, and it will be covered in another tutorial. So, and when you press Alt A, you can also press Shift Alt A to play the timeline in here and in the 3D viewport. If you pressed Alt A in the curve panel, it would just play in the curve panel. So it's maybe make another little bit of bounce there. Insert keyframe and go along another. We'll do the same again, because we've got kind of the base location there, and we just move it along by Shift D, and then just grab the point. Okay, it's not very dynamic at the moment. You might want to speed it up a bit, maybe make the the points a bit closer together using the curve sheet, and maybe even add a bit of dynamics with the scale, make it look like it's bouncing a bit more. But you've pretty much got the very basics of how to move an object around and animate it. So I hope this information was helpful, and thanks for watching.